Hey, what's up everyone? Recently I asked the community to vote on the 5 characters they wanted most as DLC in Marvel's Avengers. I received a lot of great votes and I want to thank everyone who chose to participate. After reading through all the votes, I tallied them up and created a top 10 ranking for the most requested heroes, which we will go over today. As far as the poll itself, there weren't any stipulations. Viewers could vote for whoever they wanted, and I only suggested that they vote for characters they felt could realistically enter the game. However, all votes were valid and I didn't exclude any characters. Voting was held primarily on YouTube, Twitter, and on our Discord, and I ended up getting a lot of votes and a wide variety of characters. My goal is that the poll results will help us get a pulse for characters that are most wanted amongst the community, and possibly characters that are more likely to enter the game. But without further ado, let's get into the top 10. In the number 10 spot is the WASP. Specifically, we are talking about the Janet Van Dyne WASP, who was a founding member of the Avengers in the comics, and was even the one to come up with the name Avengers. We haven't really seen any Easter eggs pointing towards Wasp in the game, besides her appearance in one of the collectible comics, but her Avengers comic origins alone are enough to warrant her a valid spot in the game. However, we have seen Hank Pym in the game, aka Ant-Man, who Wasp partnered with, married, and divorced in the comics. Hank would be our closest tie to Janet in the game, so hopefully he will mention Janet during the main story to give us an idea of where she is. So although we don't know much about Wasp's whereabouts in the Avengers game, it wouldn't be surprising to see her in the game, given her comics history. I also think her Wasp sting and flight abilities would make her a lot of fun to utilize in the game as well. I should also mention that a recent datamine shows Wasp as a future playable character. The datamine from YouTuber SandersPresents gives us a list of other planned characters including Peter Parker, Hawkeye, Kate Bishop, Captain Marvel, War Machine, Black Panther, Mar-Vell, She-Hulk, Wasp, Ant-Man, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, Mockingbird, Quake, Vision, Falcon, and Winter Soldier. Datamines aren't a guarantee of what's to come, but it at least gives us an idea of what the developers have planned. We won't dive into all of that here today, although I would like to cover it in a future video. But I wanted to bring that up early because it does apply to other characters in this list, and although not official, it does give us some hope that they will be in the game. Moving on to number 9 is QUICKSILVER, brother to Scarlet Witch.
You didn't see that coming?
Although most know Quicksilver as an X-Men character, he was actually an Avenger for some time, which is why he was included in both the X-Men movies and Avengers Age of Ultron. However, Quicksilver could enter the game with no ties to the X-Men, since the comics retconned Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch's backstory. Instead of them being mutants and the children of Magneto, their new origin is that they were taken by the High Evolutionary who experimented on them and then returned them to their true parents. Quicksilver also has minor ties to the Inhumans now. After Scarlet Witch causes all mutants to lose their powers, Quicksilver is able to gain his powers back through Terrigenesis. Terrigenesis and Inhumans are very prevalent in the Avengers game, so Crystal Dynamics could use it as a way to introduce Quicksilver if they wanted. Regardless of how Quicksilver could be implemented, it's no surprise that fans are voting to see him in the game. His speed abilities would be very unique to the other heroes already in the game, and would add an interesting element to combat. After seeing the tremendous work the combat designers are doing to make each character feel unique in Marvel's Avengers, it's hard not to get giddy when thinking about what they could do for Quicksilver's combat and traversal. Next up is War Machine.
Boom. You looking for this?
So we actually have some legitimate leaks and rumors to discuss with War Machine, and it's looking like he will enter the game in some capacity. A couple months back there was a leaked LEGO set, which also shows us some potential other DLC characters, such as Black Panther, Captain Marvel, and Hawkeye, who was recently revealed to be the first DLC character. Theories are arising that Captain Marvel, Black Panther, and War Machine could be the 3 mystery DLC characters teased during the July War Table. Along with this, a few days ago a datamine hit Reddit showing 3 other characters, including War Machine. The other 2 characters are Kate Bishop and She-Hulk. It still remains to be seen if this datamine is legitimately suggesting new playable characters or not, so take it as a rumor for now, but it does bring up some potential theories. Since these 3 characters are very similar to other existing characters in the game, the theory was that we could be getting some kind of premium hero skins, where combat and traversal stays the same, but voices and cosmetics are different. However, in an interview with IGN last year, it was stated that Crystal Dynamics is not going to do reskins of characters, so we'll have to see what exactly Crystal Dynamics has planned for these heroes, and whether or not this datamine leads to anything significant. But it's looking more and more like War Machine will be a playable hero in his own right, independent from Iron Man. But overall, with so many potential leaks and rumors pointing towards War Machine, it sounds like we might be getting him sooner than expected. I really hope so because I'm personally looking forward to using that shoulder-mounted turret. In the number 7 slot is Captain Marvel. We already mentioned her potential leak through the LEGO sets, but there are also many Easter eggs pointing at her inclusion in the game. I think the most notable one is her poster on Kamala's bedroom wall, since we get to see her full character model and outfit. Also hidden in Kamala's room is a poster of Carol Danvers in her Miss Marvel Warbird outfit, which will no doubt be an alternative costume for her in the game. I think it is also a safe bet that she is one of the 3 mystery characters set to release within the first wave, along with Hawkeye. So like War Machine, Captain Marvel could be right around the corner. Regardless, Captain Marvel would be an excellent choice to bring into the game for multiple reasons. Her powers would really excel in a game as in-depth as Avengers, with her photonic light blasts, super strength, and flight, just to name a few. I'd personally love getting to up the ante by making her go binary during combat, possibly as an intrinsic ability. I also think that introducing Captain Marvel into the game would add a meaningful aspect to the story for Kamala Khan Miss Marvel. Kamala's idol is Captain Marvel, which is why she has so much of her memorabilia and takes on her old name, Miss Marvel. Having a scene where Kamala gets to meet Carol and receive Carol's blessing and approval would be a really great moment, so hopefully we won't have to wait too long before getting Captain Marvel into the game. For the number 6 spot, we have Wolverine. Before you start thinking that X-Men will never make it into the game, there is actually a recent quote from creative director Sean Eskai about the likelihood of their inclusion. When asked about the potential to see characters like the X-Men as DLC, Sean had this to say: "One of the things that is important to know about the way we approach stories, and this is what Marvel is very good at, in terms of opening up that 80-year history, as long as we can ground those heroes and as long as we can place those heroes in our universe within our story, every hero is on the table. The opportunity to see much more diversity of heroes, of storylines, of everything is kind of what we're trying to set up with this living organism that is the AIM-dominated world that happens after the campaign. That's the foundation of where we can now create these new stories and story arcs and hero arcs. And yes, the goal is to open up the entire Marvel universe to use that palette to draw from and place and situate in our world." Yes, it extends to all of the 80-year history of Marvel. The process of choosing these characters is, can we ground them all in this world? Can we make a real argument to Marvel that this character belongs here? This character will move our story forward or take us into new stories. So it's all about how we write it, how we sell it, how we situate it, and then how we then bridge that into sort of the new threat, new escalations of threats, etc. So basically, all heroes are on the table as long as the story makes sense, which means X-Men aren't excluded. However, I would personally guess that if we do see X-Men, they will be limited in quantity and to characters that have been Avengers in the past. Wolverine is one of those characters, and arguably the most popular, so he would be an excellent choice to bring into the game. As far as how he could be implemented into the story, I think that it would make sense for Wolverine to want in on the fight against AIM, since AIM's kidnapping and experimentation on Inhumans would hit close to home for him based on his own experience as a Weapon X experiment. It could even be a case where AIM takes over the old Weapon X facility for their own purposes, and Wolverine wants to take it down, making it a new region in the game. Other potential regions that might accompany Wolverine could be Madripoor, an island in Southeast Asia, Japan, or even the X-Mansion itself. There are also plenty of other potential locations, so it's not hard to imagine a character like Wolverine being able to broaden the scope of the Avengers game pretty easily. As far as villains, I can't help but get excited by the idea of a one-on-one Wolverine and Sabretooth fight in the similar vein as the Hulk and Abomination fight. I also think the Silver Samurai would be a unique villain if we end up somewhere in Japan. Combat for Wolverine would also be a joy to see, since it will no doubt be satisfying to watch Wolverine slicing through AIM robots. We could also get his Berserker Rage implemented in a similar way to Hulk's, where we have to balance his rage meter. But anyway, I think the opportunities are endless for adding Wolverine into the game, so if the X-Men are truly still on the table, I think myself and many other fans would love to see Wolverine make it in. Breaking into the top 5 is Ant-Man. We've mentioned Ant-Man a little bit throughout this list, and that's primarily due to Hank Pym's existence in the game, who even received his own teaser trailer back in the initial E3 reveal. However, we only ever see Hank Pym and not the Ant-Man suit. What we know so far is that Hank is running the Resistance faction in the Anthill and will play a prominent role in the story, but we don't know if Hank will ever suit up. All we've seen is his Pymtech laser and gear status effects that shrink enemies. It remains to be seen if Hank is still capable of wearing the Ant-Man suit, or if we might get a different Ant-Man in the game, like Scott Lang. Either way, it's hard to ignore the possibility of Ant-Man in the game after seeing Hank Pym on multiple occasions. I also think his combat would work very well in the game, with the potential to control his shrinking during combat or triggering combos that include shrinking, similar to how he fights in the movies. Giant Man abilities are also likely because we've seen similar abilities in Kamala's Embiggening. It would also be really fun to have Ant-Man's traversal tied to him riding on flying ants. If Crystal Dynamics is open to exploring regions outside of Earth, we could even see the Quantum Realm as a region. I don't know how likely that is, but it's fun to imagine. For a possible villain tied to Ant-Man, I personally would like to see Ultron being built by Hank Pym throughout the story. There were potential leaks suggesting that those seeds are indeed planted throughout the story, but take that with a huge grain of salt. Regardless, Ultron could be a really cool way to go in the future, and would give us more robots to fight. Ultimately, Ant-Man would be a really cool inclusion as a playable character, and I think his likelihood is pretty high. At the number 4 spot is Vision. Depending on how Crystal Dynamics choose to implement Vision into the game, he could tie closely with our discussion of Hank Pym and Ultron. In the comics, Hank Pym creates Ultron, who in turn creates Vision, with the help of Phineas Horton, whose name we've seen mentioned in different gear pieces. Horton created the original android Human Torch, which is why Ultron seeks him out to make Vision. In the comics, Vision is tasked with defeating the Avengers, which could be a cool way to introduce him into the game. Maybe Vision could start as an adversary and then break through Ultron's programming to become a hero. This theory of course leans heavily on the idea that Ultron will be part of the game, which may not be the case, but I'm sure Crystal Dynamics could come up with other ways of introducing Vision if they wanted to. You may also be wondering if Vision's inclusion means we would have to have Infinity Stones in the game, since the movies included the Mind Stone in Vision's origin. In the comics, it's actually not an Infinity Stone and is instead a solar jewel, which as you would expect allows him to absorb sunlight to energize himself, and also to project solar blasts. The solar jewel would add a ranged element to Vision's combat, and I think his ability to phase would add a unique layer to his combat as well. Vision can control his density, allowing him to phase through objects or become extremely durable, which is definitely an ability that could have multiple applications in the game, from traversal to dodging attacks, or making punches hit harder. Intrinsic abilities for Miss Marvel and Hulk already operate somewhat similarly, so I think Vision's abilities could be used pretty effectively in the game. Let's now move on to number 3, the Sorcerer Supreme himself, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange would very easily add a unique element to the game just with all the magic, spells, and trippy effects. There are limitless possibilities when you add someone like Doctor Strange into the game, and if there's anyone that I would want to see the combat team get creative with, it's Doctor Strange. You already know the skill tree would be very vast, and each ability would be very visually appealing with different magical effects. There are plenty of regions that could accompany Strange as well, since he could open the door to many different realms or universes. My personal vote would be the Dark Dimension, where we could fight hordes of mindless ones and maybe even Dormammu himself. Mephisto's realm is also a potential region, since Doctor Strange has had multiple run-ins with Mephisto, most recently in the comic series Doctor Strange Damnation. I think bringing a character like Doctor Strange into the Avengers could also open the door for more mystical characters to enter the game as well, most notably members of the Midnight Suns, a hero group that take on darker and more mystical threats. Other potential villains for Doctor Strange to face in the game are Morgan Le Fay, Baron Mordo, and Nightmare. Unfortunately, we haven't had any Easter eggs or references to Doctor Strange in the game so far, but it's not hard to imagine him being a DLC character down the road. Strange is such a fan favorite with so many potential applications for the game, I have to imagine he's on Crystal Dynamics' DLC roadmap somewhere. Let's hope so at least. That brings us to the number 2 slot, which is Black Panther. Besides the leaked LEGO sets, we don't really have many clues to Black Panther in the game, although I think we can all agree that he is very likely to enter the game early on. I think it's also very likely that Black Panther will be part of the first wave of DLC heroes and bring Wakanda as a region with him. Crystal Dynamics have often stated that Marvel's Avengers is a global-based game, with all regions being focused around Earth. When I think of Earth-based regions from the Marvel Universe, Wakanda is one of the first ones that comes to mind, and it would definitely be an incredible region to explore. We do have one tease for Wakanda in the game though, and that is through this SHIELD map. It's been shown that if Wakanda existed on a real-world map, it would be located here to the right of Uganda, which is pretty much this location on the SHIELD map. I know that's not exactly hard proof for Wakanda in the game, but I do think it's a tease. Including Black Panther and Wakanda in the game could also open up new gear and status effects. We haven't seen Vibranium as a resource in the game so far, and it's possible that it could be saved for Black Panther's DLC. I could totally see a Wakandan faction and Wakandan gear being sold exclusively by vendors in Wakanda, maybe even by Shuri. Black Panther's ability to absorb energy and then release it could be a potential status effect for legendary Wakandan gear. Even if it's not, that will surely be an aspect of Black Panther's moveset in the game. For Black Panther's combat, I definitely expect to see him as a very agile and acrobatic fighter, similar to how Black Widow fights in the game. Of course, Black Panther would be much more unique, since his fighting style is much more nimble, and Black Panther often moves like a panther, which would be really cool to see in his traversal and fighting style. Along with his traversal, I'm assuming he'll move around regions the same way as Captain America does in the game, although we don't know exactly how that will be yet. Speculation is that Captain America will be a fast sprinter, and it has been confirmed that Cap will be able to wall run. I would expect Black Panther to mirror Cap's traversal, so for now I'm expecting him to also be a sprinter with some wall running and parkour thrown in. There are also a few noteworthy villains that Black Panther could go up against, the most obvious being Killmonger, a dark reflection of T'Challa and someone who matches his skill in combat. Killmonger is a worthy adversary for Black Panther and could make for some very fun and challenging one-on-one boss fights. If not Killmonger, Claw would be a great runner-up. Claw is often looking to conquer Wakanda and steal vibranium, so it wouldn't be hard to imagine him being an adversary in the game, maybe even hired by another villain group like AIM. His sonic hand cannon could also add an interesting element to boss fights and make him a unique foe to face. Another alternative is Namor the Submariner. Although Namor is often a hero and someone we will discuss as a potential playable hero, he and Black Panther are often rivals. If there are plans to add Namor down the road, it could be cool to see him as an adversary to Black Panther early on, only to have them team up later on. Overall, there are a ton of ways to introduce Black Panther and make him truly stand out in the game. I'm sure we'll see him as a DLC sooner rather than later, but for now, he takes our number 2 spot. Before we get to number 1, I want to quickly go through some runner-ups. There were so many good votes and such a variety of characters that I want to give some love to as many as I can in this list, so I'm going to very quickly run through ranks 20 through 11 before unveiling our number 1 spot. At 20 is Iron Fist, a master martial artist from Kunlun with the ability to harness his chi into devastating strikes. At 19 is Moon Knight, an ex-mercenary imbued with power by the Egyptian moon god Khonshu. 18 is Ghost Rider, the Spirit of Vengeance. Johnny Blaze made a deal with the devil, making him the Ghost Rider, a creature who seeks vengeance on the wicked souls of Earth. We just discussed number 17, Namor, the ruler of Atlantis. With an underwater level in the game and a quote from Scott Amos stating that it could lead to more, there could be some hope of seeing Namor in the game. At 16 is Deadpool, the Merc with the Mouth, another fan-favorite X-Men character. At 15 is another X-Man, Storm. Storm can control the weather and was once the wife of Black Panther, so maybe there's hope she will be waiting for us when we inevitably go to Wakanda. At 14 is Quake, an inhuman shield agent with the ability to create powerful waves of vibrations. We actually saw an Easter egg for Quake in the beta on a cell listed D. Johnson for Daisy Johnson, the real name of Quake. At 13 is She-Hulk, lawyer and cousin of Bruce Banner, who was previously mentioned is actually looking pretty likely to enter the game soon. At 12 is Daredevil, the Man Without Fear. Daredevil was blinded as a child but gifted with enhanced senses, allowing him to see the world and fight crime in ways nobody else can. And just barely missing out on the top 10 is Falcon, an Air Force veteran with mechanical wings who once held the mantle of Captain America. So now that we've seen the top 20, let's now unveil our number 1 spot, which is Scarlet Witch. Scarlet Witch is a powerhouse in the Marvel Universe with a unique power set. Like Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch can bring a magical element to gameplay with her chaos magic. Wanda's powers come from a few different sources. Her mother is Natalia Maximoff, the previous Scarlet Witch, and when Wanda was a baby, she was imbued with latent potential for magic by the demon Chthon. The High Evolutionary also took both Wanda and her brother Pietro for experimentation, which is another source of her power. Scarlet Witch is immensely powerful, and she has even been known to shift realities. In the game, I would expect to see her use a variety of hexes as abilities. For example, she could send out hex bolts and hex spheres as ranged attacks, and she might also have the ability to heal teammates through her magic, similar to how Kamala can heal teammates through one of her abilities. Like many other characters on this list, Scarlet Witch is another character where the combat team could really get creative with her abilities, all of which would be very visually appealing with red auras as she channels her chaos magic. As far as regions in the game, I think Transia could be an interesting location tied to Scarlet Witch. This is the country where the High Evolutionary experimented on her and her brother. More specifically, Wundagore Mountain, where the demon Chthon was imprisoned. We could also get Sokovia, a more well-known region from the MCU. Scarlet Witch also has helped take down a variety of major villains in the comics as well, such as Magneto, Ultron, Shuma Gorath, and Doctor Doom. So it's tough to say who might be a villain tied directly to her. Maybe we could see the Emerald Warlock from her recent comic run, or Crystal could decide to stick with the X-Men origins and have her go up against Magneto. Regardless, there is a lot that can be done with Scarlet Witch due to her unique and expansive power set, and it's not surprising to see her voted as the #1 DLC character. Let's hope Scarlet Witch isn't too deep into the DLC roadmap and that we get her sooner rather than later, because she really does have so much potential for this game, and it would be a blast to play as such a powerful Marvel character. But anyway, that's the top 20 characters the community wanted to see for Marvel's Avengers. Thanks again to everyone who chose to participate. I really appreciate you taking the time to vote. If you're a podcast listener, I recently started a podcast based on Marvel's Avengers and Marvel gaming in general, so I'll have the Apple Podcast link for that in the description as well. I'm hoping to discuss topics that I don't have time for on YouTube, and maybe further expand on certain videos. In general, hopefully we can do more polls in the future, because they are a lot of fun and I always enjoy seeing what the majority of people are hoping to see out of the game. Hopefully after a year we can look back on this list and see that a majority of these characters have been included in the game. We've already had 2 DLC characters announced, which are Hawkeye and then Spider-Man for PS4, so we should start to hear more about DLC characters once the game releases on September 4th. Speaking of which, if you're looking for people to play the beta with or when the full game releases, you can join us on Discord. The link is in the description below. Also, I want to very quickly thank Beefcake from Discord for helping me retrieve comic panels for Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, and also thank you to Jordan Sumbu on Twitter for sending me links on the datamines. But that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.
The key to saving our future lies in the past.
Clint? Well, I guess that explains the shock arrow. And the bow. And the sea of emotions.